and one would have hoped.
Good morning, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 27 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. We will start by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Pursuant to Standing Order 108, Bracket 2, and the motions adopted by the committee on Thursday, March 3rd, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of the assessment of Canada's security posture in relation to Russia. With us today, the Honourable Bill Blair, PCMP, Minister of Emergency Preparedness, and Mr. Rob Stewart, Deputy Minister, Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness. Welcome to you both. Minister, I now turn the microphone over to you for your opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to also take the opportunity to thank the members of this committee for their kind invitation to have me appear before you today. Well, this is not my first time before many of you. Today marks my first committee appearance in my new role as President of the Queen's Privy Council and as the Minister of Emergency Preparedness. Your study on Canada's security posture when it comes to Russia is an important one, and I am very pleased to have the opportunity to speak before you today and to discuss some of the ways in which Canada has been and continues to make itself prepared to deal with any eventuality. Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th was a blow to the sovereignty of that nation and an immediate threat to all democracies around the world. The death toll of this conflict for the Ukrainian people is staggering. And as of June 1st, the UN High Commissioner of Human Rights has recorded over 4,000 civilians killed, including 267 children. Thousands more are recorded injured, and the UN acknowledges that the actual figures could very well be considerably higher. We continue to join our allies in condemning Russia's unjustified and unprovoked actions. Our government, and particularly my cabinet colleagues, Ministers Anand and Jolie, are working tirelessly to impose severe costs on Russia for their actions and to ensure Ukraine has the tools and support that they need to continue the fight. And throughout the situation, we remain on the lookout for all potential Russian threat activity within Canada and affecting Canadian interests around the world. Canada is operating in an increasingly complex domestic and global threat environment. We are emerging from over 2 years of a global pandemic. The impact of climate change are accelerating, leading to the more frequent and more severe natural disasters. And as our national security agencies regularly caution, our country remains a target of foreign actors who seek to advance their interests to the detriment of Canadians and Canada. Threats from countries like Russia can take on many forms. Espionage, cyber attacks, various methods of foreign interference are only a few examples. Disinformation, and another subject I know is of great interest to this committee, is another. Federal national security agencies like CSIS, CSE, and the RCMP continue to play a key role in deterring and dismantling many of these threats before that they can cause harm to Canadians. And I understand that Minister Mendicino has also been invited to appear before you on this study, and I fully expect he'll be able to go into greater detail about the work of the agencies under his purview. As the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, part of my responsibility is not only to prepare for future emergencies, but to look at where we can proactively mitigate risks. And we have adopted in this country an all-hazards approach to this work. And if disaster does strike and threaten the safety of Canadians, one of my responsibilities of my office is to play a coordinating and convening role to support the Prime Minister and Cabinet through our immediate response. In times of crisis, Canadians expect their governments to work together efficiently, expeditiously, and effectively in order to ensure their safety and to address the situation at hand. One of the key ways in which the federal government coordinates during an emergency is through the Federal Emergency Response Plan that I'll hereafter refer to as FERP. The federal government turns to the FERP when an emergency is so significant that it requires an integrated federal response. The FERP is intended to cover hazards of all kinds, including both domestic and international emergencies. The FERP was last updated in 2011, and as our threat environment continues to evolve, we must continually assess our response plans to ensure that they remain relevant and effective. And to that end, Mr. Chair, I've been given a mandate by the Prime Minister to look at the renewal of the Federal Emergency Response Plan. The quick and accurate flow of information is also critical in an emergency, and that is why I would also like to take an opportunity to recognize the important work of the Government Operations Centre. In any active situation, the GOC's public servants play an essential role in monitoring, keeping all implicated partners informed, and providing assistance in coordinating the response. It is a 24/7 responsibility, and I take the opportunity to commend them for their extraordinary work, particularly over the past 2 years, where we have seen enormous requirements and demands upon them through the pandemic and through natural events such as the floods in British Columbia and the wildfires experienced right across this country, and many other similarly challenging events. And as we speak, Russia's forces remain within Ukraine's borders. The harm that they have already caused, the destruction of cities, the widespread loss of life, is something they must be held accountable for. And as a government, we remain committed to ensuring the safety of all Canadians. We will continue to work closely with our partners on mitigating risks, building resiliency, and ensuring we are ready if and when an emergency occurs. Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to provide my opening remarks, and I look forward to the committee's questions.
Thank you, Minister, and you won't have long to wait because those questions begin right now. And the first slot goes to Mr. Lloyd. Sir, you have 6 minutes whenever you want to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister and official, for coming out today. You certainly haven't had any shortage of natural disasters to deal with since you took on your role, Minister. And it does feel like your role in emergency preparedness is overwhelmingly or almost entirely focused on these very serious natural disasters. But we know from this committee that Canada is not immune to emergencies related to foreign espionage, specifically cyber attacks, which we've seen Russia particularly, but other countries as well, particularly adept at. You didn't mention anything about cyber attacks, and I know the 2011, the FERP hasn't been updated since 2011. You did say there is an update coming. What are we going to do about the threat to our cybersecurity? What are you doing in your role as minister?
Thank you very much, and Mr. Danon, it's a very important question, and I want to assure you that whole of government is seized with our responsibility. The response is primarily led within our government by the Communications Security Establishment, which is under the Minister of National Defence, the CSE, but also it involves the important work of other national security intelligence agencies, such as CSIS, and of course any criminal investigation arising is the responsibility of our Federal Policing Service, the RCMP. I will tell you that Canada and its allies have attributed malicious cyber activity to Russia in the past, including in 2018 for the development of what was called the NotPetya malware, used to indiscriminately attack critical financial, energy, government, and infrastructure sectors around the world. In addition, in 2021, you may recall that Canada joined its allies in attributing SolarWinds compromises to the Russian state-sponsored actors involving malware being installed in an attempt to steal data and cause costly mitigation activities. In Canada, we are very fortunate to have laid an important foundation in the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which is intended to help protect Canadians. This has already led to the establishment of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, which is a single authoritative source for expert technical advice and support for Canada and Canadians. The Centre provides public advisories. There's a great deal more information, Mr. Lloyd. I'll happily go into it with you if you have time.
Thank you. We do have short time. You did note, you've attributed the SolarWinds attack in 2021 and then 2018, a previous cyber attack. Has your government identified, you talked about disinformation, has your government identified disinformation in the 2021 federal election as being from foreign sources?
I can advise you, and I've checked in anticipation of your question, I have not received any information that Russia was involved in any effort at foreign interference in the last federal election.
I understand that. But if Russia sees that one country can influence our elections, then they might be emboldened to try to do that themselves. So has your government identified any foreign interference in the 2021 federal election?
I can tell you that our agencies were very active, and it was during the period of the caretaker regime in which the deputy minister perhaps could provide more information, but they were very alert and vigilant with respect to foreign interference in our last election. I have not received directly any information that would provide evidence of that interference.
Are you personally aware
but there were
anecdotally
concerns.
of any foreign interference?
I'm sorry?
Are you personally aware, even anecdotally, of any foreign interference in the 2021 federal election?
Well, I think we've all heard anecdotes and various opinions laid, but I have not received directly any information from our intelligence services that provided evidence of that foreign interference, and perhaps the deputy minister.
Is the deputy minister, is that something that you guys are pursuing? Are you investigating the potential for foreign interference in the 2021 federal election?
Absolutely. And we headed a Security to Elections task force and a cabinet established panel of 5 deputy ministers who would be in receipt of that information.
When can Canadians expect a report on that, if any?
The panel was stood up to monitor the election and to make sure that there was no threat to the overall integrity of the election, and that was
And
the
they
conclusion.
concluded that there was no threat to the
No
election?
threat to the overall integrity of the election.
What about in individual ridings? Did they determine that there was any impact on individual
No,
ridings?
we did not adjudicate individual ridings.
So you are saying today that your intelligence has said there was no impact on individual ridings for foreign interference in the 2021 election?
I am not saying that.
Okay, so you're saying, but you said you couldn't say that there was an impact on any ridings.
There was no threat to the overall integrity of the election.
Okay.
There were, as you would expect, activities in social media, which would constitute disinformation and attempts by various parties to influence votes in various.
Well, Minister, you've now heard from the DM that there was influence, foreign influence in the 2021 election. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, perhaps I misheard, but I heard the deputy minister say that there was no foreign interference impacting on the integrity of the election.
On the overall election, but the deputy minister did just clearly state that there was that you did cite that there was foreign interference in the election.
No, sir, I did not.
So you just said, that the overall integrity of the election was protected, but that you did cite that there were social media attempts for foreign interference in the 2021
No, I
federal
said
election.
there were social media efforts to influence the outcome of the votes, which we did not adjudicate to be foreign interference.
Oh, you have not adjudicated that to be
No,
foreign
we did not
interference.
adjudicate individual ridings, and we did
Okay.
not adjudicate them to be foreign interference.
And the case is now closed on that, or are you continuing to investigate that?
No, we're not continuing to investigate. We're obviously monitoring in both public and in national security institutions the environment for
Is there
those.
any lessons that you learned from that? Oh, sorry, we're out of time. Thank you.
I'm glad we were able to clarify that at the end. Exactly what was said, so there was no misinterpretation of what the evidence might have said to us all. Now I would call upon Mr. Noor Mohammed. I think you're with us virtually, sir. You have 6 minutes whenever you begin to take the floor.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister and Deputy, for being with us today. I'm very pleased that my colleague, Mr. Lloyd, led off with the question about cybersecurity, at least at the outset of his question, because I think it's important for Canadians to hear from you, Minister, directly about the preparation that we have for our critical infrastructure, our grid, our water supply, so on and so forth, in respect of potential cyber attacks. Can you share a little bit with us around your view as Minister of Emergency Preparedness, how prepared we are, and the type of work that your department and others are doing to ensure that Canadians can feel safe, feel assured that the power supply, water, other critical infrastructure will indeed, is indeed in a position to withstand potential cyber attacks that may affect computer and other systems that regulate that infrastructure?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very important question, Mr. Noor Mohammed. And first of all, I've had a number of discussions with, for example, the Community Security Establishment, which is the federal department that primarily has responsibility for ensuring the protection of our government systems. And I am assured that the world that we sometimes would define as the GC.ca data environment is very robust in its resiliency and security. And there's been significant work done by CSE and all of government in order order to make sure that those systems are well protected. We're also working very closely with the provinces and territories, as well as municipalities and the private sector, because the critical infrastructure is quite diverse and spread across the country and is often under the purview and authority and responsibilities of the provinces, territories, and in many cases municipal and even private sector interests. I will tell you that I believe that there's a strong level of resiliency and strength within the financial sector, with other certain areas of critical infrastructure, but we have seen quite recently cyber attacks that are directed towards critical infrastructure, such in the United States, for example, excuse me, with pipelines. But in this country, we've seen similar attacks, sometimes taking the form of ransomware attacks, which are not necessarily foreign interference, but rather a criminal attack on those systems. That are directed towards healthcare data. For example, in one of our provinces, we've seen attacks on municipal transportation networks, which are also formed part of critical infrastructure. And it's an important part of the work that both CSE and CSIS and our government are doing, working with our provincial and territorial partners and with private industry, in order to go out and provide them with support and information to help them become better prepared in the face of these types of attacks, and also develop supports. When we provide that support to our provincial, territory, and private sector partners when they are subject to these types of attacks, our government goes in and provides expert assistance to help them recover.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to ask my next question to Deputy Minister Stewart. Deputy, you cover a very large remit, and you have a lot indeed to be worried about. And so I want to make sure that you understand the question I'm asking you now is not at all intended to be a political question. And you, as a public servant whose service we value, I would like very much if you could give us an answer from the perspective of the public service. As a public servant, one of the things that this committee has looked at in great detail is misinformation, has looked at the way in which the voices of the far right, conspiracy theories, et cetera, have been amplified by Russians in order to sow discontent, to foment discord, and frankly, to destabilize Canadian society. As a public servant with purview over our national security and public safety establishment and our preparedness establishment, how concerned are you about this? And can you share with us some of the things that you are doing to buffet and to prepare our institutions against these these concerns and these potential risks?
Thank you for the question. I will say, just as a starting point, we are constantly trying to monitor and improve our ability to monitor the risks associated with mis and dis and malinformation. There is an institution in the global affairs portfolio called the Rapid Response Mechanism, which was agreed to by the G7, which is tasked with the monitoring of media and social media for this kind of threat, and it works in concert, obviously, with allies. Inside the national security community and in the policing community, we are also doing the same thing. And we are obviously concerned about the risks that mis and dis and malinformation pose to Canadians and to the stability of our democracy. So we feel that this is an area where we have to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort, and that is certainly something we are doing.
Thank you. Minister, back to you. As a British Columbian, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to, first of all, thank you for your visit to BC recently, and to ask you, as we head towards summer and, hopefully not another forest fire season, we've seen, terrible devastation of infrastructure in British Columbia over the course of the last year or so, and certainly response from all levels of government to try and address it. With the experience of the last couple of years, how prepared do you feel we are as a province? How prepared do you feel the federal government is in order to be able to respond to risks that are likely to find their way to British Columbia again through the forest fire season this summer and beyond?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I will tell you that we work very, very closely with Emergency Management BC in their firefighter response, and I will tell you, after a number of years of experience in working with them, they are quite expert at this and provide a very robust response. However, as a result of the fires that we've seen over the past 2 years,
just 10 seconds, please.
We're investing a lot of money in training additional firefighters and providing additional equipment. We're also investing pretty significantly in a new wildfire detection satellite system. And so, although we have a robust response, We know it needs to be better, and by the way, we're including traditional Indigenous knowledge and greater engagement with Aboriginal communities in that response.
Thank you very much. I would now invite Ms. Michaud to begin her 6-minute slot. The floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister, thank you. Welcome to our committee, and thank you for attending, Mr. Stewart, as well. Minister, you mentioned during your opening statement the economic sanctions imposed by Canada on Russia in order to try and isolate the country due to its invasion of Ukraine. And it is something that we've been examining here at the committee. We also see that the National Defense Committee is studying this evolving situation, and it's completely unanticipated. Nobody had anticipated the invasion of Ukraine. Do you believe that these economic sanctions might have repercussions, that there might be a backlash against Canada in the short and medium term? How are you preparing for this, and if so, are you preparing for it, and if so, how? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it is a very important question. And when we imposed these sanctions, we looked very carefully at if we were vulnerable to reciprocal actions on the part of Russia. Canada does not use Russia as a particularly significant trading partner, but there were some impacts. And for example, a very significant impact, Russia is the source of much of the nitrogen fertilizer, which is essential to Canadian agriculture, farmers across this country. And because of the sanctions that were imposed, it did have an impact on the availability and the cost of that much needed fertilizer. And I know this is an issue that Agriculture Canada is very much seized with and is working with in order to provide support and assistance to our farmers impacted by that measure. We're also seeing, obviously, as a result of the sanctions, not just Canada imposed, but that have been imposed globally, particularly among Europeans, it's had a very significant impact on supply chains and in particular around energy products, petroleum and liquid natural gas. The impact obviously most severely felt in Europe, but it's having a reciprocal impact here. And we're seeing impacts of the supply chains here and obviously in the cost of gasoline for Canadian consumers. And so those are all issues I know that are of significant concern to this committee, I think to all Canadians, that we are all unfortunately have to pay a bit of a price for our response to Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. But our support for the people of Ukraine is unwavering, and we have joined a global effort in order to respond with these sanctions. And I believe that the sanctions are quite impactful on Russia, and they are often motivated by the profits they make from their trade, and particularly in gasoline and liquid natural gas. And those sanctions, I believe, will have a detrimental effect on them.
En matière de sécurité,
With respect to security and cybersecurity, do you have any concerns? In Quebec, for instance, we have key infrastructures that have been the target for some months now, such as Hydro-Quebec, as well as aluminum smelters, who are being hacked by Russian hackers. You mentioned that you're working hand in hand with the provinces, municipalities, and the private sector. So how do you work with them, and what are you doing to prevent these kinds of attacks? These have already taken place, of course, and one can believe that this will increase over time. So how are you working with them to ensure that you can safeguard our essential infrastructures?
Very much for an important question. First of all, our strategy, as I've already mentioned, involved the creation of a number of federal agencies and bodies responsible, including the National Cybercrime Coordination Unit under the RCMP, to conduct criminal investigations. But very importantly, cybercrime events we know that it can impact our provincial and territory partners and critical infrastructure. And so we're delivering programs that are focused on industrial control systems for critical infrastructure. We've been working very closely with stakeholders in providing training, testing response, and recovering capabilities, promoting security and awareness. Just a few weeks ago, a multi-sector network meeting was held with critical infrastructure stakeholders, including our provincial and territorial partners, to discuss threats and mitigation measures. And in our budget 2022, a funding of nearly $700 million is provided over 5 years to support how we fight cybercrime and defend critical government and private sector systems, including for our provincial partners, in order to improve and increase our collective resilience to these types of attacks.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. In this study, some experts appeared before the committee and indicated that Canada would not have the necessary tools to efficiently fight cyber attacks before 2023. So perhaps we should have begun being concerned with this 15 years ago, as the Americans and Europeans have done. And perhaps when achieve this, we don't have the necessary system in place to face these threats. So what is the governance strategy to ensure that you have the necessary tools to face these attacks and to face all kinds of cyber crimes, whether this be ransomware or programs? There are a number of words and tactics deployed. Do you believe that Canada is lagging behind compared to other countries? And if so, how will you make up for that delay?
I do with some assurance that we work very closely, particularly with our Five Eyes partners. And it's not just sort of a government-to-government relationship, but in fact, among our senior officials, and particularly among the members of the National Security Intelligence community within Canada, and among our Five Eyes partners, there's a great deal of collaboration and work together in the sharing of tools and responses to improve our resiliency. Some of the questions you ask, I believe, would be more appropriately answered by the Communications Security Establishment, and perhaps the Minister of Defense. But however, I work very closely with them, and both myself and the Deputy Minister, and I can provide you with assurances that I believe that CSE and our officials have been incredibly vigilant and vigorous in their response to cyber attacks. There's a high degree of expertise, and when we have had among our provincial and territorial partners, cyber attacks that have affected critical infrastructure systems there, we've very quickly been able to respond, sending expertise to there to help them in their recovery and to provide them with a great deal of support and advice. And so, although there's always work to do, I would acknowledge that they're doing a pretty good job.
That's a lot of thank yous. Okay, now for the last portion of the first round of questions, I invite Mr. McGregor to begin his 6-minute slot. Sir, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister Belair, for coming before our committee. I think Canada and Russia, of course, we have the longest coastlines in the Arctic Ocean, and we know climate change and its effect on the Arctic, the retreating sea ice. And with that retreating sea ice, of course, it becomes a vicious circle, because the more ice we lose in that ocean, the worse climate change effects will be. I guess one of the worrisome consequences of the war in Ukraine is that we have incredibly antagonistic attitudes with our Russian counterparts in a vitally important ocean. I guess I'm wondering, from your perspective, Minister, is in spite of the war that's going on and the antagonistic relations between our governments, there still is a great need for cooperation between our two countries with respect to climate change. The fact that we both share coastlines in the Arctic Ocean, we both stand to lose a lot with the melting of permafrost. Could you maybe update the committee on what the status of cooperation is like between our respective scientific communities with respect to research and science in climate change, and is there still the possibility of any kind of cooperation in addressing this very real and most dire threat to the 21st century?
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. And it is a very important question. And let me acknowledge that, the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia has impacted a number of diplomatic discussions and efforts. I was most recently at a UN platform on disaster risk reduction. And I can tell you from experience that the Russians' illegal invasion of Ukraine directly impacts some of those discussions. However, and I think it's an important however, you highlight some very significant issues with respect to climate change, Arctic sovereignty, and our shared responsibility with all of those who have an interest in the Arctic to take collective and coordinated action in response to some of the risks that exist, particularly as it relates to climate change in the Arctic. I believe, notwithstanding the obvious and understandable impact on some of our diplomatic discussions, the important work of ensuring that the right thing is done in the Arctic will continue to assist. And we'll assess, the impact of Russia's illegal actions as it impacts in those discussions. And that work is ongoing. Not directly by me, by the way, but certainly by Global Affairs and the Canadian military and others in addition to our other international partners. But there are important forums where those discussions will continue.
Emergency preparedness. We know that in an increasingly globalized world and with climate change, we as a human population are being exposed to more and more novel diseases. And they, of course, are mutating. I think, the next pandemic is something that we have to keep top of mind. Our response to COVID-19, of course, we as a country, we're having to fight a rearguard action against disinformation and misinformation on vaccines. And to some extent, I think that hampered how successful we could have been. I guess what we know foreign state actors have played a role in advocating some of those disinformation campaigns. We've heard about that evidence here at this committee. But I guess looking forward to the next pandemic, or I shouldn't say if, but when it comes, what lessons have you learned as the Minister of Emergency Preparedness? Because in your opening remarks, you did say that your mandate is all about taking that proactive approach to managing risks. I guess what lessons have you learned about trying to prevent foreign state actors from interfering and causing those misinformation campaigns, which may very greatly hamper our public health efforts here in Canada?
Thank you for a very important question, and I will tell you, I've just come from a meeting of the COVID committee where we had a presentation on this very subject with the Chief Medical Officer of Health. There is a robust discussion going on in Canada about how we counter misinformation and provide Canadians with accurate evidence and data-based evidence on the nature of disease and pandemics and risk, that there be better data surveillance systems be put in place and more greater collaboration internationally. But it's also important that information be trusted. And I think that's the point. And I agree with you that what we have seen, not just in Canada, but around the world, is the importance of providing, with Canadians in particular, for us, information that they can trust and will trust with respect to the steps that they should take in order to keep themselves safe. And there has been a real challenge with misinformation primarily, and disinformation, which is slightly different, obviously, and has perhaps a more nefarious intent. But certainly misinformation has resulted in some significant challenges in how we move forward. But I think the obligation of government is to make sure that we have robust data collection systems that are transparent, that Canadians can see the basis of the scientific advice and evidence that we're acting upon, and that is being shared with them, so that they can make informed decisions in their best interest and in the collective interest of everyone's health. And so I will tell you that we've learned a lot of lessons from COVID. And one of the things that we learned is our strategic stockpiles were not adequate to the task.
Yeah.
A lot of our data collection and information that we were relying on with respect to the nature of the COVID as a disease, but also generally to disease and pandemic threats, we're seeing the emergence of a number of new variants and illnesses that are coming forward.
Thank you, Minister.
It's really important that we get good information for Canadians to make good decisions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I look at the clock, and we have exactly enough time for a full round of second-round questions. Ms. Dancho, we lead with you. You have a 5-minute slot. The floor is yours whenever you grab it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today. I'd like to carry on the theme of cyber security. I recently received a briefing from the Public Safety Department concerning cyber security. When I asked very bluntly, what would be the Pearl Harbor moment for a cyber security attack, they mentioned pipelines in the middle of winter, presumably gas pipelines that, as you know, provide significant heat to our homes, hospitals, grocery stores, government buildings, schools. Would you agree that would constitute a major emergency, a cyber attack on a pipeline in the middle of winter in Canada?
Yes, of course. Ms. Dancho, supply lines are a very important part of critical infrastructure, all of our supply chains. And so anything that interferes with those supply chains, I would consider a significant emergency, rising to the level of a national emergency.
Certainly. So what would be your first call? If you get the call that this has happened, a pipeline's gone down in the middle of winter, millions of people are without heat, what would be your first step?
A couple of things would have to happen very quickly, but if it was related to a cyber attack, my first call would be to CSC. I'd call the director at CSC and get her working on it right away. They have the expertise within our government. Many of those pipelines, by the way, are administered by private sector. But we've already built those relationships. We've already made those connections. We're meeting regularly with those people. So we would build upon that in order to respond to get them back online as quickly as possible. but there would be other considerations because very quickly, in the absence of those pipelines, it would have impact on, like, further downstream on refineries, but also then, it wouldn't take long for it to begin to impact heating and other energy requirements for Canadians. And so we would look for ways to alternatively deliver those products as quickly as possible. But there are a number of responses that would be triggered immediately.
And I'm sure you're very familiar with the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack from just a year ago last month, that shut down a significant source of energy for the United States, and there were 17 states of emergency, including Washington, D.C., and took them several hours to get them back online. And so that was less than a day, but if it had been longer in the middle of winter in Canada, you can imagine, as you've mentioned, it'd be very serious. What sort of elements would you pull in? Would you be calling the military, the RCMP? What would that look like on the ground? And what sort of conversations have you had with your cabinet colleagues in preparation of a worst-case scenario?
As far as what resources would be called in, we would call anything that was required and everything that was required. And I think as we've demonstrated over the past 2 years, we understand the importance of moving quickly in order to respond for requests from assistance from the provinces and territories or the private sector, or even in response to something that we would consider a national emergency. Mm-hmm. And so the resources that are appropriate, if it was, for example, a cyber attack, perhaps a ransomware attack as it was with the Colonial Pipeline, certainly the police would have to become involved immediately.
And what if it was a physical attack? We recently, as you know, saw the Coastal GasLink attack of the 20 armed assailants with axes. They caused millions of dollars of damage on the Coastal GasLink works. I'm sure you're very familiar with this. So we are seeing a rise of violence against our pipeline infrastructure. Are you concerned that there could be a physical attack, God forbid, a bombing of our infrastructure, and how would you handle that?
The responsibility of that is the police of jurisdiction to respond in the first instance, and when the situation exceeds the capacity of the police of jurisdiction, there are mechanisms to elevate that request to bring resources from wherever is required, and those are reciprocal arrangements that are in place with the police and managed very ably by the RCMP.
Have you had discussions about emergency preparedness if there is a physical attack from these extremists on our pipeline infrastructure since the events of this, I believe it was in February?
I will tell you, not specifically, because it did not rise to the level of exceeding the capacity of the police of jurisdiction to respond.
So you have had not any conversations to, should this increase in severity, of how we would handle it?
We have processes in place should it rise to a threshold in which it exceeds the capacity of the local police of jurisdiction to manage. Those processes are well established and well understood right across the country, but we have not had an event that required that to this point.
Are you concerned that Canada could be subjected to more events of attacks on our pipeline infrastructure?
I'm always concerned about the security and the integrity of all of our critical infrastructure, and we work hard to be prepared.
Are you concerned that none of the assailants from that Coastal GasLink pipeline attack have been caught?
Again, I'm as the minister, I'm not going to comment on any ongoing investigation. That would be entirely appropriate, but I do have confidence in our police agencies, and particularly the RCMP, to do their work.
Okay. I just asked because as the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, I can see you take this very seriously. I do have concerns that the assailants have not been caught, and that sets a precedent for copycats. They got away with it. Maybe we can too. And I would just ask that you have more discussions with your cabinet colleagues to ensure these individuals are held accountable. Thank you, Minister.
Perfect timing. Thank you. I would now turn to Mr. McKinnon for 5 minutes of questioning. Mr. McKinnon, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for joining us today. It's always a pleasure, and it's good to hear the breadth and scope of what you're working on. I know you're working a lot on natural disasters and forest fires and earthquakes and stuff, but in the context of our study on the security implications of what's going on in Ukraine with Russia and so forth, and we've talked about cyber, we've talked about the economic blowback from sanctions, we've talked about the possible harm to international agreements and so forth. I guess I'd like to hear from you what you see the greatest threats that Canada faces in regard to this situation.
Well, there's a number of things that we're monitoring very carefully, and I think out of an abundance of caution, and that's the approach I like to bring to it, is to provide an abundance of caution and care to ensure that the health and safety of all Canadians. I think probably the most significant, because of our distance from the conflict in Ukraine, probably the most significant threat that Canada would face from this would be cyber related. But having said that, we take an all hazards approach, and we're monitoring the situation very carefully. I also would comment, there are 1.4 million Ukrainian Canadians that have a very strong interest, and they have family and perhaps business interests, and at the very least, they love their mother country. And I think we also have a duty to them to be particularly vigilant in order to make sure that they are not subject to undue, not just influence, but any kind of interference or threat. And sometimes we see, for example, when they advocate for Ukraine, the response in social media can be very challenging for them, and particularly for certain vulnerable members of that community. And so we remain vigilant in our support of those Ukrainian Canadians, as well as protecting of Canadian critical infrastructure and interests.
Thank you, Minister. Actually, I think I'll segue from there to individual Canadians. What can we do? This threat from Russia is somewhat distant in some respects, but it's also very close to home in many other respects. What can ordinary citizens do? What should they be doing to take prudent precautions to prepare themselves for the future in relation to this conflict?
Yeah, I always remind myself that in any kind of emergency, the first response is always the public. And so the more information we can provide to the public about potential threats and risks, I think the better Canadians can respond to protect their interests. And for example, I think helping Canadians be alert to possible impact of misinformation and disinformation, so that they can make perhaps better informed decisions and not be inappropriately influenced by information that is intended to cause them to react in a certain way. And so I think we have a responsibility to do that. But let's also acknowledge, Mr. McKinnon, that Canadians are feeling the impact of the sanctions on Russia. We're seeing it at the gas pumps. We're going to see it. Our farmers are experiencing in their acquisition of the fertilizer they need. We're seeing real impacts from the sanctions and from the conflict in Ukraine, and perhaps no one's experiencing the impacts of that more than Ukrainian Canadians here in this country. And so I think we all have to remain alert and vigilant and supportive of those who are being impacted in particularly hard in a particularly difficult way by all of the outcomes of the invasion of Ukraine.
One last question. I'm not sure how much time I have left, but so I was interested to hear in your discussion of upgrading the federal emergency response plan. I wonder if you could speak to us more about that. Where does it need to be upgraded, and what kind of time frame are we looking at for that?
Yeah, one of the things that I was previously, as you'll know, the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness. But one of the lessons that we've learned from the impact of the pandemic, but also by what we are witnessing in this country with an increase in the frequency and severity of climate-related natural disasters. We've seen it with heat domes in British Columbia, very significant floods last fall, and then again this spring. We've seen a very, challenging wildfire season. And of course, concerns about pandemics and disease are accelerating, and it does require that we keep up with the times. And I believe in the business of emergency preparation and preparedness. If we maintain the status quo, we fall behind, because the situation is actually accelerating and getting more difficult. And so it does require that we, through the Federal Emergency Response Plan and all the ancillary work that goes on around that we continue to build upon our ability to create greater resilience and awareness about the impact of these types of events.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Minister, as always.
I would now turn to Ms. Michaud for 2.5 minutes of questioning. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister, perhaps Mr. Stewart could answer this question, but we know that Russia uses the concept of a hybrid war to destabilize certain countries, and some experts believe that apparently Russia would have contributed to the trucker convoy here. We know that there was foreign interference. We know that the United States also provided funding. According to the information you have in hand, would there have been involvement of Russia in this trucker convoy? And if so, how did this occur?
Yeah, if I may begin, although I saw you were trying to direct that to the deputy, and I'll turn it over to him for a second. I will tell you that I've received no information and no intelligence that indicates that Russia was involved in any activity related to the protests, convoys, and blockades.
C'est correct.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Would you have any other examples of groups in Canada that were supported by Russia to become involved in politics in that particular movement, who really interfered in our institutions, in our democracy? Or do you have any fears with respect to other groups that might use misinformation or disinformation or cybersecurity to interfere?
I can tell you that a number of the entities that we have recently listed as terrorist organizations have origins in Russia. That doesn't necessarily reflect the activities of the state. And so I would differentiate between hostile activities of a state actor, such as Russia, and activities that originate in Russia, which are primarily criminal-based.
J'imagine que vous
I take it that you're in agreement. I have very little time left. But recently, the House voted for a motion to compel your government to develop a strategy against foreign interference, which is based on the Australian model. Could you perhaps tell us if anything has been done since then? Is a plan being considered, something that will be implemented shortly to fight foreign interference?
Yeah, I don't want to get too far ahead of that work, but I can tell you in response to that, our government is very much engaged in a number of different fronts at looking at how we can better manage and protect Canada and create greater resiliency against foreign interference. Part of that is in the basis of the cyber world. Part of it is in the
10 seconds, please.
Information and misinformation, disinformation, and some of that work is also the responsibility of our national security intelligence agencies.
Thank you, Minister. We'll move to Mr. McGregor for 2.5 minutes, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, on Monday, your colleague, Minister Mendicino, introduced Bill C-21. And while a lot of the attention on that bill has been focused on the national handgun freeze, there are also some significant amendments within that act, or within that bill, for the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. So now people who operate high security sites, which basically are sites where you have those Category 1 nuclear material or Category 2 nuclear material, basically our nuclear power plants, if this bill goes through, the amendments to that act are going to require those sites to have an on-site nuclear response force that is composed of nuclear security officers, basically designated as peace officers. They will be proficient in all manner of firearms. I guess in your role as Minister of Emergency Preparedness, you have to try to proactively manage risks. Can you tell us, Minister, have there been any instances in Canada which have prompted this amendment to the legislation? Like, did you find that there was a serious gap to the physical security of our sites? Were there any risks or that manifested themselves that prompted this amendment?
If you don't mind, I'm going to rely on my previous experience as a police chief in Toronto. We have a nuclear plant nearby. And there was an established, initially the policing and security of that was being provided by the police of jurisdiction, but they formed their own security services. There has been significant work done on potential risk assessments of those facilities, and I am very much of the belief that it is necessary that we have a robust and properly equipped security response in order to protect those types of facilities because of their criticality and the potential risks that it involves. They are already able to provide that type of armed response that you describe. We're just building it within the Act so that they'll be able to continue it in light of the prohibitions that we put in place.
And I'm guessing the danger from a foreign state actor would be relatively low. That might trigger Article 5 of NATO. But so are the risks more on the cyber front rather than the physical front?
Well, frankly, the risks are both. That it is possible, and it could be a hostile state actor. It's also a site that could potentially be targeted with others with terrorist or other types of criminal intent, and therefore it is necessary for the protection of the citizens. There are risks associated to nuclear facilities, and those risks have to be properly mitigated by an appropriately equipped Security Service.
Thank you, Minister.
There.
Now I will turn to Mr. Van Popta for a 5-minute slot, sir, whenever you're ready.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minister, for being here, and also Deputy Minister. I have a question about Canada's infrastructure, or perhaps international infrastructure, and how that might, how Canada's vulnerability might play into that. I was reading in a BBC publication from about a year ago that said that a Russian ship carrying submersible, like submarines, was tracked sailing around the British Isles, likely mapping locations of underwater cables, like optic fibers, like the world's information superhighway. Is that a threat to Canada, and are we prepared for something like that?
Frankly, any effort by a hostile state actor to gain access or to in any way interfere with our information systems. And I will tell you that information and communication technology is one of our critical infrastructure sectors. And so ensuring the security and integrity of those systems is an issue of national concern. And yes, we would be concerned by such activity, and certainly we would be vigilant against it.
Of course, we would be concerned, and of course we would react to it, but talking about mitigation, is there risk mitigation? Like, would we have a plan B if something like that were to happen?
Well, again, a question perhaps better put to the ministers responsible for that. By the way, every federal department, there are 10 sectors of critical infrastructure in this country, and each one of them is a responsibility of a particular minister. In addition, every one of those ministers is responsible for developing and creating an emergency response plan, which includes mitigation and prevention measures, and that forms part of the federal emergency response plan. And so I don't have the particulars, unfortunately, in front of that particular plan, but it does form part of our overall federal emergency response plan.
Good, thank you. I have a question about the North Warning System with NORAD, a partnership that we have with the United States of America. And we had witnesses appear before this committee telling us that the infrastructure, the technology is woefully out of date and needs to be upgraded. The infrastructure is designed to track, a bomber, for example, coming over the North Pole to North America, but not designed for hypersonic missiles today. So I know it's a national defense issue as well, but in your department, is this a matter of concern at all?
Yeah, of course. And we've had discussions, of course. And as you quite correctly point out, the National Defense is responsible for that. I know the Minister of Defense has, within her mandate provided by the Prime Minister, a responsibility for renewal of NORAD. And you're right, the system as it was designed many years ago was to deal with primarily airplane incursion into Canadian airspace. And now there is an evolving series of threats, including, obviously, supersonic, hypersonic missiles. And so that renewal is part of the responsibility, and frankly, questions, I'm aware of that work, but questions with respect to its progress better put to the Minister of Defense.
Good, I understand that, and I respect that. Deputy Minister, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, indeed, I could add to that. Underneath the Federal Emergency Response Plan that is under the responsibility of Minister Blair, we have a layered set of plans, including to events such as attacks. And they are, in the realm of emergency preparedness, it's to deal with warning, early response, coordination, and early recovery. So it's not about defense as much as it is about managing what would happen on the ground. And that's a shared responsibility with the provinces and territories. And so we have a very joined-up system of response in the event of a certain set of scenarios.
Good. Thank you. I'll pass on my time. Go ahead.
Want to give it back to me?
Yes, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you. Then we will turn for the last slice to Mr. Chang. You have 5 minutes, sir. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the Minister and the Deputy Minister for joining us today for this important discussion about our national security. Minister, in March, you chaired an incident response group meeting discussing Russia's ongoing violation of international law and military aggression towards Ukraine. Could you provide an update to this committee on the work that is being done within your department to address these serious issues?
Thank you for the question, but let me also characterize that work as a whole of government response. And certainly as it pertained to discussions around the sanctions that Canada has imposed, and that has been largely led by our Minister of Global Affairs. With respect to the support that we've been able to provide to the Ukrainian military. Again, questions more appropriately, I think, put to the Minister of Defense. But what we have learned about our response to emergencies of all kinds in this country is that it's not siloed into one ministry. And that one of my responsibilities in chairing that committee, for example, is to bring about greater collaboration and coordination among all of the ministries so that we can all work more collaboratively together. And there's also a responsibility to work very closely with our partners, both internationally and domestically, the provinces and territories. And so, for example, we have a table of senior officials responsible for emergency management who also work very closely together to bring collaboration between the provinces and territories and ourselves. And I think some really important work is also going on with both private sector and with Indigenous communities to bring that level of collaboration. That's really the responsibility that my department has in ensuring that we all work really well together and that nothing falls through the cracks.
Thank you, Minister. I understand we've been talking about cyber security or cyber attack, but due to the war in Ukraine, has Canada stepped up on being on high alert for cyber attacks from Russia or any other nations?
Yeah, I think I can acknowledge that there is a heightened vigilance currently in place, particularly with the Communication Security Establishment and the RCMP and CSIS with respect to any form of interference, including cyber, that could take place in this country, and as well working with our partners in the private sector as well. We have met with them and encouraged additional vigilance and better preparation on their part as well. You know, the work of building resilience into our critical cyber systems in this country is ongoing because those who seek to attack it are innovative and are, you know, they come up with a new way to attack us every day. And so it requires just as much vigilance on our part to always be prepared to respond.
Thank you, Minister. We know that together Russia and Ukraine account for about 29% of the global wheat export, and Ukraine is also a major exporter of corn. As the world becomes increasingly concerned about the global food emergency resulting from this war, what steps are you taking to ensure that Canada is adequately prepared to address these issues of food shortage?
Yeah, well, on a couple of fronts. First of all, we are developing our own national strategy on securing supply chains in this country because we recognize not just for agricultural products and food products, although food security is a very important issue, of course, for us, but also with respect to energy and other essential supplies and trade corridors. We are also recognizing that there's going to be a significant global impact, exactly as you refer, and there are countries of the world that are heavily reliant on food products, particularly wheat, being developed that are traditionally coming from Ukraine and Russia, all of which have been interrupted by the conflict that's currently taking place through the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And so there is an impact globally. I'm aware, because I've been involved at the table in discussions of the efforts of Canadian agriculture in an effort to respond. I will tell you, I think Canada is well prepared to ensure, although there's obviously an inflationary impact on food products as a direct result of that conflict, I think Canada is prepared to provide and to provide assurances of a secure food supply for this country. But we are very concerned about the global impact that it's going to have, and there are other regions of the world particularly vulnerable to the impacts of that conflict.
Thank you very much, Minister. Deputy Minister, would you have anything to add to this food shortage issue we have?
I think I would only add that, you know, this is an issue of global significance and concern and is in discussions in global fora around the world Food
So in other words, it impacts everybody, not just Canada alone.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you so much. That's
you.
my questions for.
Yes, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Colleagues, I want to, on your behalf, thank the Minister and the Deputy for sharing this hour with us. We can only imagine the intensity of the conversations that are happening, and you're ever alert. Every day offers a new challenge and a new vulnerability, and we're very grateful that you have shared with us your best perspective and intelligence on the current state of play. So on behalf of members of the committee and indeed all parliamentarians, I thank you very much for your appearance in front of the committee today. Thank you.
Colleagues, for the opportunity to come in and speak with you today.
Colleagues, we have a short break, then we go into camera. So grab your apple juice and come back to your spot.